You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
And welcome. You are listening to Watching the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. Well, you know, if you've been listening, watching the show for any amount of time, I'm a real history buff. And all too often, especially today, where we've got people trying to erase history, cancel history, and if it's offensive, just ignore it. And I'm not even going to bother with the quote about those who don't learn from history or condemned to repeat it. When you can get an insight into a time before you were around and understand factors that occurred and listen to the story, you can learn something from it. And I recently became aware of a book called Full Circle, and it's written by Elliot Fixler with Peter Wise. Elliot's a former attorney, retired attorney, or I'd like to say recovering attorney, as I refer to myself, from New York. Elliot, it's great to have you on the show. Hey, you have a really compelling kind of story here. You were born literally during the Holocaust and during World War II, and your mother basically got you out of Europe at some point. But hey, tell us about the book. Tell us the story here.
Well, the book's 530 pages, so for me to tell you
condensed version.
And well, the story is essentially about my life and the people that I ran into along the way and played with and worked with, and that's what it's about. I think it's a pretty interesting story, and the people who have read the book have been very, very complimentary. Reading about it. In fact, my daughter, who picked it up and started to read it, and about halfway through the book, I talked to her, and she said, "Dad, I had no clue about any of this and all of these things about you." So I found that kind of interesting. Surprised about it, but
that's fascinating. So the book starts 1944. You're born, right? World War II is kind of winding down. There's a lot of atrocities taking place, obviously. And basically, at some point, you and your mother get out of Hungary, out of Europe, and you wind up in Buffalo, New York.
I finally wound up in Buffalo, New York, yeah. But, you know, I was born in the tail end of the Holocaust, and one of the last places the Nazis decided to go into and start exterminating as many of the Jews as they could in Budapest was probably a few weeks or a month or so before I was born. So, it's obviously, I don't remember very much of that. And one of the motivations for writing the book was I didn't ask a lot of questions because it wasn't things that I wanted to hear as a youngster. And that lack of having asked my mom and others about my origins, her origins, have essentially haunted me until today. And I still don't have a lot of the answers that I tried to get that are part of the focus of the book.
So it's really a kind of a search for yourself, part of yourself that kind of got lost, your family's history. And obviously your family's history affects you. And so what was the most important takeaway? Because the book Full Circle, so starts out in Budapest, then basically you wind up in Palm Beach County like me, and then you go back to Budapest seeking answers. So what answers did you find?
Well, I don't think I'm going to tell you that because I want you to read the book. And you'll find out by the time that you get to the end of it. It's almost an adventure in terms of trying to find out things. The book starts off with my as a teenager, maybe 13 or 14, I don't quite remember exactly, rummaging through a closet and finding a photograph of my mother. And it's a wedding photo with a man I had never seen before. Now, I had grown up with a man named Sam Fixler, who I thought was my father. And I wound up confronting my mom about what's going on here, what's this about, and I finally started getting a few answers, and she told me that the man in the photograph was my father, which explained some things, explained my relationship or lack of much of a relationship with the man I thought was my father, who was actually my stepfather. But it gets a lot more interesting along the way.
Yeah. Nowadays, the thing is to tell people that you're adopted, not withhold that information. But back then, family attitudes, it was different. And I guess your mom and your stepfather had reasons for not telling you. But the problem is when you try to keep secrets from those people closest to you, they often come out, and often at the worst possible time. So when you found out that your stepfather was not actually your father, what were your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts was an explanation of why my stepfather treated me the way he did, which wasn't, I think, a particularly nice way, and certainly a lot different than my friends' fathers treated them, and whatever cousins and relatives I had that survived the Holocaust, the way they treated their children. But the only thing that I learned from my mom was that my father had been shot maybe a year or so after I was born in Mauthausen concentration camp while marching and asking to step out of line, or he was asked if he wanted to step out of line for difficulty being able to ambulate, and he did, and they shot him. Now, I guess a simple, basic question might have been, well, how can you possibly know that? But I never asked it. And that, along with a lot of other things, including my father's relatives, family, I never got to learn, and I never got around to asking my mom about any of that. And a lot of the book is a search for some of those answers, like where we lived in Budapest, and it's an interesting search, and it's got some. I don't want to talk too much about it because I think the book, as it flows, makes you want to really get to some of those answers.
So, what's the biggest unanswered question that even after your search you weren't able to piece together?
Don't just survive, thrive. The Financial Survival Network.
Fury Gold Mines is a Canada-focused exploration and development company committed to aggressively growing its scalable, high-grade gold assets with major drill campaigns planned across its 3.5 million ounce portfolio. Fury is led by a management team of proven explorers and developers with a track record of success in advancing and financing project development. Fury Gold Mines is well positioned to create value for investors with low-risk development growth and the potential for a new major discovery. Fury Gold Mines trades on the TSX and NYSE American under the ticker FURY. To learn more, go to furygoldmines.com. That's furygoldmines.com.
This is the Financial Survival Network, the information you need to thrive now more than ever.
Well, I don't have much of a history of my grandparents who were taken off to Auschwitz maybe a month or two after I was born from the village that my family had lived in for a while, and went right into the gas chambers. And in fact, in the folio that I found the picture of my father and my mother in wedding attire were also some photographs, which were of my grandfather, his brother, and a cousin in line at Auschwitz. And wow. I never bothered pursuing that. Mm-hmm. I found out much later in my searches how that photograph came. I believe that photograph came into my mom's possession, and it actually is in a book called the Auschwitz Album, which photographically chronicles what the Nazis did when they shipped by train people to Auschwitz and sent them either into forced labor into the gas chambers.
Interesting.
So that's all kind of part of the book and how I found out we got it, and I think it's some pretty interesting reading. I mean, I have people telling me they couldn't put the book down. I don't know. Maybe they were just flattering me because they were my friends. Who knows? But I get this every time I pick it up and start looking for things such as spelling errors, which I am advised are in the book, or some things which I might have said in the book which they didn't like or didn't think were accurate. So I get to read it, and I think to myself, boy, this is pretty good. And my memory, I don't know, I can't tell you that I always remember everything that I wrote in the book. I got so many things that I figured out afterwards that I didn't talk about in the book. Of course, my publisher, all during an editor, Peter Weiss, was moaning and groaning about it's the longest book that he's ever done, twice as long. When am I going to be done with it?
Well, that's always a problem with authors is where do you end this thing? And the mystery continues. So this is a bit of a detective story too. And I guess as an attorney, it actually called upon your skill set. So you were uniquely qualified to embark upon the search.
Yeah, I was, but it didn't do me a whole lot of good. I think I got lucky in some places, and a very small part of the book deals with some of the cases that I handled, which were I think pretty interesting. And I had a unique way of trying cases, I think. And I never finished the case in my summation where I didn't mention my mother. Talk about it.
So tell us about your unique trial tactics. I'm always interested to hear fellow attorneys how they engage a jury, a judge, and how they keep everybody from falling asleep during a trial, which is often what the jurors do.
Yeah, I never had that problem. Nobody ever fell asleep during cases I tried. I guess some of the examples of things which I did in the courtroom and the way I handled some of the judges, but I was very straightforward with jurors. And of course, every lawyer wants a jury to like them because that goes a long way in terms of what result you get. But I think juries can generally sense when attorneys are full of it and when they're not. And I never underestimated the jury's ability to look right through you. And so I had lots of success because I think I was very honest with them, and I think it was appreciated overall. But I did different things in the courtroom, and I give some examples of them in a few of the cases that I talk about.
Okay, so your relationship with your stepfather, who you found out to be your stepfather, how do you think that influenced your success as a practicing attorney?
Well, I started painting houses. He was a house painter, and I started painting houses with him when I think I was about 11 or 12 years old. And I wanted to make sure that when I was able to do something for a living, I didn't have to wear overalls, that I'd be able to wear a suit and tie and do that kind of stuff. I was also influenced by, I did a lot of reading. I had a lot of alone time as a youngster. And I was absolutely fascinated by Clarence Darrow and the cases that he handled. And that's what I wanted to be. That's what I wanted to do. So
you found your calling.
Very hard at it.
You found your calling. And growing up in Buffalo in the 50s, what was that like?
I mean, I think it was a great place to grow up. I had lots of friends, although my first day in school, I was chased home by the entire class, and I was living about a block away at my uncle's house, and I couldn't speak the language, and so there was an interesting start to my education and living in Buffalo. But all in all, I think Buffalo was a pretty nice place to grow up. So,
all right. Well, it's had a bit of a resurgence over the past 10 years. A lot of gentrification, a lot of millennials, a lot of immigration to Buffalo, and hopefully it'll become close to what it was. The one thing about Buffalo, though, those winters, you never forget a really bad winter in Buffalo, do you?
Well, yeah, but it was a nice way for me as a youngster to make a living by shoveling sidewalks for $5 to throw. So it was, I mean, but you get used to that kind of thing. So, in fact, I took my driving test with about a foot of snow on the ground. In my father's, I think it was a '58 Ford station wagon filled with paints and drop cloths and that kind of stuff, and in a complete blizzard. So
Oh, that's great.
that's a good memory to have.
Yeah, that's great. So lessons from what you learned from that period of history compared to, say, where we are now. Can it happen again? Is it happening again? What's your take?
The Holocaust?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you see anti-Semitism has risen all over the world, and even in this country, even in New York and other places. So, sure. I mean, people are indoctrinated very, very easily, and the internet and the media have such control over youngsters and even older people that sometimes they just accept what they hear without really thinking about it or caring to think about it.
Yeah. A lack of critical thinking, a lack of independent thought and analysis. One thing we learn as attorneys, question everything, built-in skepticism, analyze people's statements, analyze the reason for making these statements, and yet it's a method of thought that the schools don't really seem to concern themselves with. It's more like the hive-like behavior of what's taught now, conformity and go along to get along.
Yeah, well, there's generally two sides or more to every story that there is, and there's no point in me going into the politics of this because,
well, not politics, it's just human behavior we're really talking about as it manifests itself in our current environment. I always thought there were three sides to every story, Elliot: his, hers, and the truth. Right?
It could be. The truth could be on one side or the other.
Yeah, or neither, for sure. All right. Well, you want to take a look at the book? You want to pick it up? It's called Full Circle by Elliot Fixler with Peter Wise. And From Budapest to Palm Beach to Budapest, my circular search for my personal identity. If you can get 80% of what you're looking for in life, I consider that a success, Elliot. If you got a question for Elliot, shoot me an email, kl@kerrylutz.com. You can find the book on Amazon or wherever fine books used to be sold. And Elliot, been a pleasure. Good luck on the book. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, your solution to today's trying times. For the latest, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.